Steve, you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. So I am opposing this bill on First Amendment grounds, despite what was just said. I oppose this bill because the safety of those who protest against right-wing extremists will be compromised by this bill. And I can explain this by pointing out that I think what Rep. Corvisi brought up earlier about there being elements on the right and the left who are extremists is perhaps true superficially, but in fact, if we look at the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, in 2018 they did a report that showed that the 53 extremist murders that occurred in the United States were all from the right. In 2019, 41 of 42 of the extremist murders were from the right. This idea that there are good people or bad people on both sides of the equation, as President Trump said following Charlottesville, is really not that true, right? We know that the actual violence comes from extremists on the right. It does not come from extremists on the left. This idea that we need to surveil people who go to protests, this is something that I think Bloomberg was trying in New York after 9/11. After something like 8 years of surveillance of Muslim and other left-leaning groups, he had not one arrest, not one case was made. This was a complete waste of time. When people go to these protests and wear masks when they're confronting violent extremists on the right, they are not wearing masks necessarily to evade detection by the police, although I can defend that position too to an extent. What they're doing is they're preventing themselves from being doxxed. What doxxed is having your identity revealed on extremist websites, which causes people to feel very unsafe. I myself, who do not wear a mask when I go to these protests, and I go to virtually every protest in Rhode Island, and I've been to many of the protests in Boston where there were problems, I have been doxxed. People put my name on right-wing extremist websites with my name and other personal information. And the idea, the implied threat is that you're not safe, right? That your views, your political views, your stances here, these are things that make you unsafe. I'm a relatively privileged person. I have a pretty high profile in the state, so I like to think that I'm relatively safe. But if you're not that person, if you're a person who has many marks against you, if you're a person of color, if you're a person on the LGBTQ spectrum, if you're a person who's defending yourself, who feels the necessity to stand up against right-wing extremism, actual real-life Nazis in Rhode Island who are out here on this lawn, right, on the back lawn, twice at least, right, here in Rhode Island, violence here in Rhode Island, despite the fact that the state police leader at the time said there was no violent incidents. During the second one, there really was violence. I recorded it, I have it on video. Right-wing extremists threw punches, there was fights broke out, the state police handled it, whatever. The idea that you can't wear a mask to protect yourself in these cases from people on the other side who basically they're the precursors to lynch mobs, they're the precursors to right-wing fascism really growing in this country. Right, this is how it starts, and you can't hide your identity from these people. That's really problematic. So that means only fewer people go out to confront them. Their message starts to grow. Things get worse. It doesn't get better when we don't confront them. That's just not the case. Letting them have their rallies and such does not make this safer. Confronting them does. If this legislature really wants to do something about right-wing extremism or any kind of extremism, right, what they could do is when these things are happening and the community is getting together, and the community, I mean actual just people on the ground, young people, all sorts of people get together and say, we want to do something about this. If legislators here came out, right, then it would be safer because you know what? The police would be there to protect these legislators. If you came out and said, we decry this kind of right-wing intolerance, we decry people who put Jews and LGBT people down, people of color down, immigrants down. If you came out and you said, did we decry this, and you stood with these people, maybe then this legislature could do something about it. But passing laws that basically just make us more unsafe, that's wrong. And on the point as to the police needing to know who these people are for some reason, I could publish something anonymously and distribute it, and that's constitutionally upheld. There's court cases on this, right? So I'm allowed to have my opinion, express my opinion anonymously on politics if I wish to. I don't, but some people might for various reasons. But when I want to express my political position in person during a protest, suddenly I have to be unmasked, I have to be identified, I have to be identifiable. I don't think that's what the First Amendment is. I think there's a one-to-one correlation between those two ideas. My right to be anonymous is my right. Trying to think of what else I have. Can I have 1 sec?
Take your time.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, right-wing organizations of the kind we're talking about, the Proud Boys, the Patriot Front, they exist right now in Rhode Island. There is a sticker right outside the State House on the Amtrak sign. I recorded it a couple weeks ago. I was getting to my car because reporter parking is there. I look up and there's a Patriot Front sticker. This is a right-wing group, right? They're here in our state. They're peppering stickers I've identified and other people on Facebook have gotten together. We've noticed them all over the state now, from West Warwick to Woonsocket, Providence. These stickers are being put up. These people are not organized well yet, perhaps, but they remain a threat. The people who are directly affected by these kind of groups, who are first in line for when they take political power, we are doing something about this. These are fascist groups. And I did identify myself in a piece about this bill. I said, I am anti-fascist, right? We talk about Antifa, and everybody goes, oh, what's Antifa? They're just as bad as whatever. They're not just as bad. That's a false equivalence, okay? And I think if you're not Antifa, if you're not anti-fascist, what does that make you? There's no Switzerland in this thing, right? We know where fascism goes. We've seen it. We have historical evidence from about 80 years ago or 100 years ago. We know what happens when fascists take power. So you don't get to be Switzerland. You don't get to say there's good people on both sides. You don't get to say there's an equivalence here, a false equivalence. You have to kind of pick a side. I think it's really important. And I guess that's all I have. I might have other ideas, but I can't read my writing, so thank you.